Parshas Vayera. This week's Parsha introduces us to the kindness of Avraham's chesed. The Parsha begins where he's sitting outside his tent, Kachom Hayom. It's very hot, according to tradition. It's the third day after Avraham's bris milah, his circumcision, and he's in pain, but nevertheless, he's there in front of his tent, looking for wayfarers that he can host. And lo and behold, this is Perek Yud Ches Pasuk Beis, that's 18:2. Vayisai Navayar, he lifted up his eyes and he saw. There are three men standing in front of him. So he sees them. And now we're going to see a recurring theme here of quickness, alacrity. Vayaratz likrosam. He ran to meet them. From the opening of the tent. So he ran to meet them. Why did he run? Well, presumably, we don't know. We don't have an insight into his state of mind other than what's written and what we hear from Chazal. But presumably, it's because he wants to help the wayfarers out of his kindness, and the quicker he can do it, the more quickly the grueling weariness and hunger that presumably the journey imposes on a traveler, he'll be able to ameliorate that, to relieve that. So it's a reflection of Avram's empathy. And the Torah goes on to describe about how even when he reached wherever he was reaching, that's what happens when you run, but then when you get there, how do you act? So the Torah describes how he acted quickly. Vayamaher Avraham el Sarah. He went quickly to Sarah's tent. And then what did he tell Sarah? Mahari shalosh si'im kemach solas. Make these quickly. Make these cakes. Lushi vasiu gos. Make goods for this. So and what does Avram do? Ve'ahabakar ratz Avraham. And Avram ran to the cattle, and he got very prime cuts of meat for his guests. Okay, so Avram is a master of chesed, of loving kindness. He longs for the opportunity to do it when it comes to his hand to do. So then he just goes as quickly as he can to help people out. Okay, now he has a request of his butler, of Zakan Beso, his household manager. His name isn't mentioned here, but we understand this to be Eliezer Eved Avram. So Avram says to him, he's sending him out. He's sending Eliezer out to find a wife, and he says, to find a wife for his son Yitzchak. And he says, don't get a wife from Benos Canaan, from the Canaanite women, but rather from Artzi, Moladti, from Charan, which is where Avram came from. So it's curious. Why? What is it about Charan that's so special that Benos Canaan don't have? So there's a lot of discussion, but the consensus seems to be that Benos Canaan, the daughters of Canaan, had a strong tendency towards pagan worship, towards idolatry, and he didn't want that influence. Now, truth be told, in Charan, they weren't so free of idolatry either, but they had something that appealed to Avram, and that was the similar character trait of empathy for a stranger, as reflected through what? Through running. So the setup here is that Eliezer goes, he makes a sign for himself if he's at the well, and he says if somebody comes out and feeds me and then offers, gives me to drink and offers water to my camels as well, that's the sign. He appears to be kind of nervous about this, and he's looking and waiting, and sure enough, there's a pretty girl who shows up, and she has filled her pitcher with water, and then he's excited, that is Eliezer. So what does he do? Vayaratz ha'eved l'krosah. Apparently this is a cultural thing within the house of Abraham, that when you have to do something, you run. And he says, can you give me some water? And she says, yes. And vatemaher, she quickly, vatord kadal yada, so she brings down this pitcher of water, this container of water, and she gives him to drink, and then she says, I'll also draw for your camels, and I'll give for them as well. And then again, when she invites Eliezer to stay in her father's house, she goes and she runs to tell her mother. So she tells her mother about all the things that Eliezer did. Eliezer had given her jewelry, and told her that he was looking for her as a wife for Yitzchak. And then we see, Ulerivka ach, now we're talking about Chav Daled Chav Tes, that's 24:29. Ulerivka ach u'shmo Lavan. Rivka had a brother, and his name was Lavan. We hear a lot about Lavan later on. This is our introduction to him. Vayaratz Lavan. Lavan's also running. El ha'ish achutz el ha'ayin. He's running to him. Vayhi kerosas hanezem v'satzmidim. And then when he sees the rings and the bracelets al yedei achoso that are on his sister's hand, and then he hears the story. Then he comes to the man and he says, "Come, blessed of God, why should you stand out there? Come." So one could say that Lavan is just acting in a way that the house of Abraham acts, which is when you see a guest, you run. Except the commentaries don't treat him so generously. Some do. Some see a sincere movement on his part. But people ask, why did he run? So the Sforno says, he gives a charitable explanation. He says that he's looking for Rivka. He doesn't say Rivka. Rivka's later than she usually is because she's giving drink to Eliezer and to his camels. Where's Rivka? Where's my sister? So he thinks, okay, maybe there's a problem. So he ran to check up on her. He wanted to protect her. Once he saw the jewelry on Rivka's hands, and he knows that Eliezer is not seeking to abuse her, or at least not apparently. So he relaxes, and then he engages, and then he says, okay, come stay with us. But his initial response was motivated by a noble desire to protect his sister. There are others, including Rashi, who say, don't think Lavan's such a good guy. There are people who are good people. Lavan is not among them. We learn a lot about Lavan later, and about how he attempts to trick Yaakov, who works for him, and lies. They say Ramai. Lavan was an Aramean, but if you move those letters around, Ramai means a liar. Lavan does not come through the story of the forefathers smelling like roses. He's one of the bad guys. So what's he doing running? So Rashi says he's running because he wants to take advantage of this stranger. Doesn't work out. He doesn't actually have the opportunity either to mug Eliezer or to steal his money, or, according to some, he sees, oh, well, Rivka was so highly compensated for just giving him water to drink. Maybe I'll get highly compensated if I give him a place to sleep. Well, that didn't happen. But according to whichever variant interpretations you have, it seems like the commentaries view Lavan as being motivated by less than noble intentions. And if he had noble intentions, he was a mixed bag. He wasn't just a good guy. He was a good guy. He was a bad guy who was capable of doing good things from time to time, and certainly understood the trappings of doing good things. And that perhaps is what the Torah is trying to teach us. You have a culture that's very attractive to Avram. We see that Avram is empathetic to strangers, as is reflected in his desire to address their needs quickly. We see that Rivka shares that empathy and that desire to do things quickly. And then along comes Lavan, who shows that he does things quickly, but it isn't really the case. It's the case that he ran, but it's not motivated by noble thoughts. And here we have one of the dilemmas of doing chesed, and one of the dilemmas of responding to people who do chesed, which is that we live by chesed. Chesed is loving kindness is our calling card. It's what we live for. It's one of the pillars of our existence on this world. It's one of the three pillars besides service of Hashem and study of Torah. We also know that in the bracha of Sim Shalom, we say, in the radiance of your countenance, you've given us the Torah of life and a love for chesed. We have a love for doing kind things. But not everybody is similarly inclined. And the desire and the call to perform kind acts must be tempered with an ability to discern when people are actually on the same page and when they may be out to take advantage of us. And we see that that's what Lavan does later on to Yaakov. He makes it his business to take advantage of him as much as he can, all while there's a expression in Yiddish, praving tzidkus. It's to show that you're really a tzaddik, but you're not. That's one of the things that some commentaries say is repulsive about the chazir, about the pig, and why we can't eat it, is that it has split hooves, but it doesn't chew its cud. Split hooves are external. Chewing the cud is internal. And a chazir can show his split hooves and say, look, I'm kosher. But in reality, he's not. So we have to have a discerning eye. And we don't throw out the baby with the bathwater just because chesed in certain circumstances is inappropriate. As the Medrash in Kohelet says, somebody who is kind to a cruel person at the end becomes cruel to kind people. In other words, everything in its place. Our default is doing chesed. We run to do chesed, but we're also careful to make sure that the situations are genuine, the recipients are genuine, the givers are genuine, and we don't lose our common sense in the process. Have a good Shabbos.